So let's walk through the central argument again, is that you're attempting to demonstrate in the book that using statistics, and you outline the unreliability of the statistics and the difficulty of obtaining them, but using statistics and also like on-the-ground anthropology and case reports, essentially, to make the case that there has been a deterioration in the public safety of women over the last, you'd say, 10 years, perhaps?
I think in the last 10 years, it's been more pronounced, but I think it's been going on for at least 20 years, depending on where you are. So certain neighborhoods in Paris or Marseille or Malmo, you could say, or in certain, the Tower Hamlets area in the UK, right around London, some of those places you could go as far back as 20 years, even longer. And that deterioration is linked to poor immigration policy, or to what exactly is the problem? Is the problem the immigration policy? Is it because I might also say I mentioned youth and masculinity as contributing factors to violent behavior. Yeah.
But unemployment as well is going to be a contributing factor. I know
that's all true. So all the socioeconomic factors, these are all contributing factors. And people actually are, I would say, more willing to talk. They feel like they're more licensed to talk about the socioeconomic factors than they are licensed to talk about the cultural factors. So if you have men and families, men and women, come from countries where men and women relate to one another differently in the public space and in the private space, and then they come to liberal societies and the values are different, then yes, all the very complex socioeconomic aspects are there. But the question is, are those the defining ones, or is it the cultural aspects? And then my conclusion is, it is poor integration policies. In other words, poor assimilation policies. And it's very difficult to culturally assimilate minorities if the receiving societies are not confident in their own values. And so the process of assimilation and developing successful assimilation, that is socializing these young men into the value, and women into the values of the host society, this is all compromised by that moral relativist attitude where we were saying you can integrate, and we will only talk about the social economic aspects. When it comes to the values, you can keep, we're not going to question those. And so there was not any time there was a proposition to, yes, impose the values of liberal societies on the incoming minorities. There would be an opposition to that. There still is an opposition to that from within, saying to do that is to recolonize them. It's ethnocentric, it's Eurocentric, it's arrogant, it's racist, it is xenophobic, it's an excuse to keep people out. And so the integration process has been frustrated, on the one hand, from the establishment that is relativist, on the other hand, by the populist and extreme right-wing parties that are saying we don't want anybody assimilating, we don't want them, deport them. And then you have this other third force, which is the Islamists, the radical Muslims, who are preaching in the mosques to Muslim minorities and telling them, do not adopt the values of the infidels, of the host societies, because they're un-Islamic. And so if you ask me, the greatest failure is, it's the failure of the assimilation process, of the integration process.
Okay, and so let's decompose that. If we had a more effective assimilation policy, what do you think that should look like? I mean, the obvious issue is employment, and perhaps the problem would disappear to a large degree if immigration policy was matched to employment policy. I'm obviously not sure how that could be done. It's a very complicated problem. But perhaps one policy shouldn't be developed in the absence of another. But I'm wondering, so people read your book and let's say they accept your conclusions I'm going to get you to state again, we've sort of developed the first part of your statement, which is that women are being compromised with regards to their safety in public spaces, and that's starting to impose counterproductive restrictions on their activities. And the second part is, and that's importantly a consequence of poorly designed immigration policies that allow for the arrival of people from cultures where women's rights are not valued. I'm not doing a disservice to your book to make that summary, I'm hoping.
No, you're not. So I think it is totally possible to make the case that you can get people to come from societies that are very different in their cultural outlook and in their socioeconomic outlook. But if then the receiving society acknowledges that there is a problem and develops an appropriate integration or assimilation regime, then you could continue to have that flow of people coming in. So yes, first of all, the immigration policies are themselves poorly designed. There's a lot of talk of asylum and refugees and humanitarianism and compassion, and very little about the consequences on the ground for the receiving societies as the number goes up and up.
Well, you used Germany as an instructive example, and maybe we can just walk through that a bit, because you stated quite bluntly in your book that Angela Merkel was motivated to switch her attitude towards refugees and the borders of Germany as a consequence of an emotional response, a compassionate response, and that well thought through policies weren't in place to back up her transformative actions.
And I spoke to German citizens who were livid with her, livid. They voted for her, or they voted for the SDP, the Social Democratic Party in Germany. So these are not right-wing extremists who want to close the doors to immigrants. But these are people who are livid, very angry, and saying this was spontaneous, it wasn't thought through. And they pointed to all the integration issues that were already straining, let me say, relations between various ethnic groups. And they said, we hadn't even attended to that. These are people who are in the second generation, and we were having assimilation issues with those. And now you open the gates and you say, okay, everybody come in, because I feel sorry for this little girl who's really upset. And the cameras are on me. So people were really angry with her. But again, I still don't think that answers the question, the deeper question, which most Europeans, maybe right now, most people on the left side of this issue don't want to face, which is, it's not the socioeconomics that changes the culture. It is the culture that changes the socioeconomics.